Welcome to our May 2021 Crescendo Connect Conversation. My name is Lisa Griebel and I'm president of Crescendo Inc. It's always so great to see our EI practitioners on the call. So thanks for taking the time to be with us today. Before we begin, I just want to set the context for our Crescendo Connect Conversations. The purpose of these conversations is really to provide you with an opportunity to learn more about how our EI practitioners are building emotional intelligence into their practices. And today it's my pleasure to welcome Jill Hauwiller as our guest speaker. I've invited Jill to share her networking experience working as a coach, a consultant, and certainly making the connection to emotional intelligence. So as you listen to her presentation today, I encourage you to think about how you might make your own connections to emotional intelligence. So before I get started, I just want to do a quick review of the EQI 2.0 model of emotional intelligence. So MHS, Multi-Health Systems, defines emotional intelligence as a set of emotional and social skills that influence the way that we perceive and express ourselves, develop and maintain social relationships, cope with challenges, and use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way. So as you look at this model, what you see, of course, is that emotional intelligence is at the core of the model, and it's surrounded by these 15 emotional competencies that serve as the building blocks for both developing and further enhancing our emotional and social functioning, our overall well-being, as well as our overall performance. So starting with self-perception, generally speaking, people that have a good understanding of who they are, so their strengths and limitations, self-awareness, they know directionally where they want to take their lives, self-actualization, and they feel pretty confident in their skills and ability, self-regard. So in other words, they have a good, strong self-perception, are likely going to be able to express themselves, self-expression, in constructive ways. And of course, being able to express ourselves constructively will contribute to our ability to be able to develop and maintain mutually satisfying relationships or our interpersonal. But again, coming back to emotional intelligence, and knowing how emotions play out inside of us will allow us to be able to make better decisions as well as manage our stress. So again, as we think of these 15 emotional competencies as building blocks, they will contribute to our overall emotional and social functioning, our overall well-being, as well as our overall performance. So with emotional intelligence as our backdrop, I just want to do a quick introduction of Jill. And I'm really so honored to introduce you to Jill Hauwiller as our presenter today. Jill is the president and principal consultant at the Leadership Refinery. It's a leadership development consulting firm based in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. She's got more than 20 years of experience in global talent management, leadership assessment, coaching, career strategy, and transition. And I can't even believe that I'm saying 20 years of experience because I think I met Jill in the very early years of her work. So that's kind of enlightening. She's worked in and with global organizations, top-ranked business schools, and professional services firms. Jill specializes in developing high potential leaders through career changes and accelerated development using a future-focused and appreciative inquiry approach to creating sustainable change. Jill often speaks at global and national events on leadership, team and career development. She's ICF's credentialed coach and is certified in many tools and assessments, which she applies to her coaching and consulting. And if that isn't enough, Jill is a certified yoga instructor and in her spare time enjoys camping, cycling, canoeing, and spending time in nature with her husband and 2 beautiful children, I might add. So please join me in welcoming Jill Hauwiller as today's Crescendo Connect presenter. Jill?
Thank you, Lisa. Nice to see everybody here. Thank you for joining us and for rolling with us with our technology today. Let's get started. I want to check in with everyone on kind of how we view networking. So here you see a slide that says, what is networking? And what I really mean is, what is networking to you? And I want us to think about it in terms of like maybe a continuum. On the far end of one continuum is the skeezy, creepy, used sales type of experience, right? And on the other end of the spectrum is this beautiful, blossoming, exchange of relationship currency. Like if we can look at those 2 ends of the spectrum, I'd love to see you place yourself somewhere on this continuum. So for those of us who are Zoom familiar and savvy, we know exactly what's coming next. For the rest of us, I will walk us through it. I would like you to go into your view options, should be somewhere at the top of your viewing screen, and select more. From there, there's I think it's more. You have an option to select annotate. So view options and either more if you need more, or annotate. For me, it's just view options and then annotate. Beautiful. And when you're in the annotate screen, you should see a text box or a list of options come up. We're going to choose the stamp. So when you click on the stamp, I want you to select an X, or you could choose a heart or an arrow, or it's up to you. We have a nice small group here today, but choose something to represent you, and you're going to go put a stamp somewhere on this line. What is networking to you? Somewhere on this continuum from skeezy, creepy, used car sales, all the way over to an beautiful exchange of blossoming and growing relationship currency. Place yourself somewhere here along the continuum.
Oh.
Now, I'm just darn curious what you're seeing right now, Lisa, because I still have a blank slide.
I am seeing stars and a heart and a check mark and an X towards the positive end of the networking. So it's the relationship currency. And there is 1 star at the skeezy end, but I think maybe that was probably me making an error. So I don't like the skeezy part. So you got the majority of people on the relationship currency end of the spectrum.
Fantastic. And while we had that chat, it gave my slide an opportunity to catch up. So I can now see what you were talking about. Most of us here, at least, see networking as this opportunity to build relationship currency. So that's fantastic. Okay, let's take that as sort of our foundation of how we as a group are approaching networking. And I think we can understand, and especially the people that we work with, a lot of us have introduced ourselves as people who work with people in transition or coach in different ways, that not everybody approaches networking the same way that we do, right? In fact, I was reading an interesting study. It was out of one of the resources I'm going to mention, this book, Friend of a Friend by David Burkus. He writes a lot about networking. And one of the studies talked about that people, after talking about networking or doing a reach out of some kind and then performing some other sort of academic task, reported if they had to reach out on something that felt it was either a bit inauthentic or serving and not their sort of true self, they felt dirty, they felt kind of icky, and they even some reported needing to take a shower after doing some networking type of event. So there certainly are people who feel that way about networking. Okay, so I want to also start by talking about some myths. So if we can get the 3 myths, maybe they are on the slide. Yep, great. The 3 myths, I'm very curious for all of you. Tell me in the chat if you don't mind. What do you think of these 3 myths, and do any of them, do you think they are true? Are they myths to you or are they truths to you?
So the myths, if you cannot see them on your slide, are networking is insincere and manipulative. Second one is networking is only about politics and getting ahead. And the third myth is that networking is done when all of the real work is done. So any reactions to those? Anne says, but it depends on mindset.
Yeah.
Jenny says those can be true, but hopefully not. Linda says these myths don't hold true for me, yet some encounters feel like they may represent one or more, especially number 1 and number 2.
Yeah.
Michelle, I don't believe those myths personally.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised because we just saw everybody kind of finds themselves over on this relationship building end of the continuum, right? So maybe the opportunity here for us is to remind ourselves, have empathy for, in some cases, people who exist on somewhere else on the continuum, right? Who maybe see networking as more dirty and skeezy, or they see it as insincere. You know, there are opportunities certainly for people to believe these myths. And I really do believe it's about mindset. And that is what is going to make a difference. So whether we're working on this for ourselves or we're coaching or developing others, certainly addressing what some of the myths or beliefs might be around networking, focus on that mindset, and then work towards that goal of in exchanging relationship currency. Okay, so we got the myths kind of out there, and we have a sense of how each of us approaches networking. We're going to do a quick poll. Now, I think I can launch the poll, and I like to call this the Goldilocks poll. It's sort of the just right, too hot or too cold kind of a check-in for all of us. So give me a moment here while I launch the poll. How often do you network? Or another way of thinking about it is how much do you network? And I would encourage you to answer this question for yourself, right? For you, hopefully you can see the poll now launched for everybody. Do you feel like you network too little, too much, or just the right amount that you need for yourself, for your professional development, for your career, for your whatever it is that you're doing? What's that? Check in with yourself.
So we've got, let's see.
I got it. Everyone's
got it.
Yeah.
All
I'm
right.
gonna end the poll.
I'm gonna end. Okay.
And let's see so everyone can see. We are collectively as a group in the too little category, but you're here, so give yourself some credit, right? What would a session be on networking if we didn't do a little networking today? So that's certainly going to be part of the program. But generally, it looks like most of us are saying too little. And I think that falls in line with what I see a lot of times with other people as well. Everybody's kind of aiming for that just right amount, but it's another thing to kind of fit into very busy lives and careers that everybody has. Okay, so we're going to talk about if we generally feel like we could network more. And Cindy, I hear you exactly what you're saying about, I felt like I could have networked more, but COVID has really put a spin on things here. For us, has it not, right? It's really changed the game in terms of relationship building and getting out there. And I mean, I haven't been to a coffee shop in 14 months. I don't know about any of you. And that's where a lot of that was taking place. So we had to get creative and find new ways of doing things. And maybe it just took a back seat because other things became a priority. So all of that is certainly our current reality. Mm-hmm. So moving forward, let's talk a little bit about what we want to see in a healthy network. Lisa, what do you see?
Well, I see, consider the quality as well as the quantity. So,
okay, good. That's where we want to be. We want to talk about who we'd like to have in our network. Great. I'm with you now. Yep. I would ask everyone to consider both the quality and the quantity of who you have in your network. And I found this list of like who to really have in your network. And I thought it was really, really thought-provoking and helpful for me. So I thought I would share it with all of you. And look through this list, and I'm going to invite everybody to do a little bit of a relationship audit for themselves here today. Take a look at all of these who's you might want to have in your network and ask yourself if they exist. Are they there for you? Like a partner, someone who's truly in it with you. A sponsor, I define a sponsor as somebody who is going to bat for you when you're not present. That can be an internal or an external relationship, but they are speaking your praises when you're not present and not able to advocate for yourself. I think this combination of having a realist to keep us very grounded in our possibilities, and as well as an idealist to help us think bigger and look at possibilities, is really important as well. Also, I think most of us recognize the value of a connector. Like, who are those people in our network who are those great gateways to other relationships, other opportunities, other information, and are willing and able to connect us to that type of information that we need. Of course, a mentor and a coach are really important roles and people that we want to have in our network. Those can change over time depending on what our goals are and what they're doing, but they each have a significant role and operate in different ways. And I thought these last two were really helpful. They kind of pushed my thinking a little bit on who's important in my network. Number 8 here, the wannabe, someone who is maybe a few stages earlier than us in our career, who are aspiring to do things that we are doing or like we are doing. We can learn so much from people who are approaching, looking at a career, an industry, or a field in a new and different way. Lots of great insight that can come from a wannabe, as well as making sure we have a true industry insider as a part of our network. So hopefully you've had a moment to think about this list, maybe even jot down a note or two, because in a moment here, you're gonna need a sheet of paper to really think about and assess, audit, if you will, your own network and look for those opportunities to add some quality and quantity relationships. So with that, we are going to start our assessment process. Give everyone a chance to take a look at your own network. We're going to do this quickly. This is sort of a scratch the surface opportunity that you have some takeaways that you can apply after our session here today. So I'm going to invite you to conduct a bit of a relationship audit. And these 9 characters, if you will, or these 9 network connections will become somewhat important for you as we do the assessment. So as
Jill?
we assess, yes,
Jill,
ma'am.
can I interrupt just for a second? I noticed that Sheila was asking if you could just say a little bit more about an industry insider before
Absolutely.
we move on to the audit.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So Sheila, saying more about an industry insider, I would say an industry insider as a part of our network would be someone who is on top of trends, willing to share those type of information with us. So for me, I might think about, do I have a true industry insider who's on the cutting edge of coaching, leadership development, able to share, bounce ideas off of, right? These are true relationships, not people that I follow, right? Following is great, right? I can get those insights from a lot of people, but a true relationship, someone in my network who might be in those fields, right? But again, for someone like myself or some of you, maybe you are coaching or developing people in a specific industry. And so, or you have a specialization, right? In healthcare or manufacturing or whatever it might be. Do you have a true industry insider in that industry who's a close part of your network? I hope that helps, Sheila. Give us a little bit more about what we mean by an industry insider. It's for you to answer based on the industry that you work or want to work in. Okay, so we're going to go to the relationship audit slide that has a list of things that I want you to look at. Maybe you're already looking at that, maybe not. That's where we're going.
We are.
So we are, okay, you are. Let's jot down, just take a moment. I want you to just write down, if you're a mind mapping person, maybe you want to draw the circles. That's why I gave you this image to think about. Write down the first like 5 to 10 strong connections that you can think of who are in your network. Just grab a sheet of paper, write down their names. This is for you. You're not going to share it necessarily with anybody else. But who are your true strong connections? Even think back to, do I have a realist and an idealist and a true partner and a connector? You know, those might be some things you want to grab as you're making your quick list here. And again, this is just for you. Writing down your real strong connections. And like I said, you can easily pick this up again and keep working on it as the day goes on, as the week goes on, as you start to think about your network. I would also encourage you, when you feel like you've made progress on that, to write down your weaker ties or some of those connections that are a bit more distant, right? Maybe more acquaintances, people you know that may fall into some of those categories that we talked about are important to have in our network. So maybe your wannabe is a bit more of a weaker or more distant tie, or your industry insider might be a little further away. All that's okay, but also think about who are some of your weaker ties and jot those names down for yourself as well. I think many of us who've worked in the space of career transition probably know this, but I think that the research that has come out in the past few years on weak ties has been really fascinating, that they are probably and proven to be more powerful than our first degree connections or our stronger ties. So it's really important to be paying attention to our list of weaker ties or those distant ties, because they tend to be the ones that have give us access to the things that we are really looking for, whether it's adding, relationship, getting information, certainly in job transition, those second and third degree connections, those weaker ties tend to be very influential for us. And so I would also encourage you to take a look at your lists now and think about who you want to have in your network and look for some patterns. Look for what might be missing. Do we have a geographical representation that might be relevant or important to us? Again, we all have different goals and what we're trying to accomplish with our networks. So there's not a one right answer here, but maybe we want to look at, do we have functional diversity? Do we have gender and ethnic diversity in our networks? Why might that be important as we think about those important roles of partners and wannabes and industry insiders and all those other things? And I think recognizing vertical diversity is important here too. Lots of levels is what we mean by that, right? So early career, mid-career, senior in organizations, later in their career, all those types of things, because we get lots of rich perspective when we can have those diverse viewpoints. So with that in mind, hopefully you've had a moment to think about your strong connections, to think about some of your weaker connections, to look at that list of who's important and really think about what might be missing. We're going to put you into breakout groups right now and just get you thinking about what skills can you use here. We're here to talk about emotional intelligence. Which of those EQ skills, reminder for you here on the screen, which ones can you use to leverage and grow your network? So we'll put you into about, I think, 3 groups, Lisa. I think I can do that from here. We're only going to give you about, let's say, 8 minutes to chat. Come on back and just give us a few highlights of what you talked about, and then we'll move on to how we can all work towards building our professional networks. Tell us a little bit about high level. What did you guys talk about when it comes to EQ skills that you can leverage to grow your network?
I honestly don't remember which group I was in, so I don't know.
Okay.
I think.
Anne's group. Anne's group is now group 1. We're just going to call it that. Okay. Anne's group is group 1. Give us a high level summary.
I think each of us really appreciate that interpersonal aspect, a deep interpersonal relation with the other when networking, and that kind of impromptu, casual, natural networking. So we really focused on the sections of EI being the interpersonal self-expression, and then a little bit of self-regard, in the sense of self-actualization, being able to openly share, who you are. And then we talked about how things have changed with technology, the use of technology, the need to use technology, and how it's not that natural, instinctive connect or ability to see, feel the other and be able to respond effectively. A couple of key observations from my partners were, you can't control necessarily or influences directly the response of the other through technology. It's harder to control perceptions, as well as, I love the statement, the platform, it's a platform, but it doesn't really give you indications of level of engagement.
Mhm.
You know, and people don't necessarily stay and respond to the other. You know, so there's a disconnect between the message you send and the response at times, or the lack of response. So that whole technology piece is something that we're wrestling with. One idea we had was, you know, within our sessions, within our programs, build in time for networking. Another is make it much more interactive, you know, and enable people to share. So my team members, anyone else have any comments to share? So that's kind of what, yeah. Okay, great. So that's really what we had talked to, and we enjoyed talking with one another.
Well, great. A little networking took place right there in your group of 3. Love it. Okay, group 2, who would like to represent group 2?
I think Sarah said she wanted to.
Great. Sarah, tell us what you talked about.
Okay. Well, so we really talked, Lisa did a nice job of summing it up at the end of saying you really probably could make a case for any of the 15 subscales as something that you could leverage in different respects when it comes to networking. We particularly kind of focused on the self-perception and self-expression areas as being important to kind of get out there and have the confidence to do so, and have the goal as well as, to just put yourself out there. And then we moved over to the interpersonal area and talked some about, you know, the interpersonal relationships being something to leverage, and the empathy as a way to make connections. But really, there's probably a case to be made for every one of these.
Go figure.
Yeah, go figure, exactly. Nicely said, thank you. Okay, Sheila Shelley, group 3, who would like to just summarize what you all talked about?
I can't see Shelley, so I'll jump in and I'll let Shelley course correct if she has additions or if she saw it differently. We also thought that all scales could be reflected in networking. We also did a bit of compare contrast of when we're networking to support others compared to when we're networking for ourselves. And then I also had shared an example of the connection with brand, where someone reached out to me because of something they thought of me, like they thought I was known for, but I didn't think I was known for that. So when we're networking, the opportunity to make sure our brand is aligned and that we're checking with others in terms of how they see us.
You nailed it.
Nice. Very good. Well, hopefully you enjoyed talking about networking in a very short sort of networking experience, and thinking more specifically about how these EI skills really are at play, whether we're networking on behalf of ourselves or networking in the spirit of being in service of others. So with the time that we have remaining, I would like to just share with you in the handout some quick tips. And I want you to be thinking about the model and thinking about these 15 EI skills for these tips and how you might apply it. Feel free to think about it for yourself or others who you might be serving and helping as it pertains to their own network growth. Okay, so the first tip is start networking before you need it. Many of us have heard this or thought this before, but it's really important. And by the way, these 8 tips for networking the right way are from a Forbes article from their Entrepreneurship Council. If you want to go look that up, you can just type in Forbes 8 tips for networking the right way, and you'll get to that. So the first one, start networking before you need it, is you think about that. And we've probably all heard that advice before, right? Dig your well before you're thirsty. There's lots of ways to say that. What EI skills would we use to network before we need it? Go ahead and put them in the chat if you would. Just think of something on that model. The ones that, I mean, a few that come to mind for me, there's a bit of independence, right? Acting on our own. I could see reality testing would show up here. Start networking before you need it. What else? Interpersonal relationships. Thanks, Rochelle. Emotional self-awareness.
Yep.
I see we're now lighting up the chat. Assertiveness, you bet. Definitely problem solving. Yep. Okay, so you can see. Yeah, optimism. Thank you, Sarah. Of course, right? We might have to have that view as we go into digging our well before we're thirsty. Love it. Okay, let's go on to the second tip, which is have a plan. Do the same thing for me. Throw in the chat. What comes to mind for you? Which of these EI skills can we use if we are trying to network the right way by having a plan? Stress tolerance was the first one that came to mind for me. Thank you, Rochelle. Oh, sorry, Lisa, that was you. Rochelle also agreeing with problem solving, impulse control, you bet. I think even some emotional self-awareness, right? Like I need a plan because I want this to go a certain way. Be prepared. Very good. Shall we do the third tip? Maybe we're there.
Forget
And
your
I'm behind.
personal agenda.
You're looking at it. Great.
Yeah.
Yes. Forget your personal agenda. So this came up in Sheila and Shelley's conversation, I know, when we talked about being in service of others rather than being in service of ourselves. So what are those EQ skills that help us forget our personal agenda? Of course, empathy, social responsibility. I wrote down optimism even as a fit here. And one of the reasons why putting our personal agendas aside is that it can be much more effective in networking and much more authentic for people to connect in relationships. If we step out of the mindset of this as a self-serving activity and instead go into the, I'm just building relationship currency for myself as well as others. So tip number 4, never dismiss anyone as unimportant. I bet we've all run into some circumstance or some person in our careers where they have violated tip number 4. But what types of skills from our EI bank of skills can we use here?
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's an important reminder too that everyone we encounter has value and everyone has purpose, right? And so let's not dismiss anyone and take a more inclusive approach as we meet people. Yeah, I see things coming in the chat now. Empathy, self-regard, stress tolerance, social responsibility. Real good.
Mm-hmm.
Tip number 5 is connect the dots. So again, I think this speaks to a lot of us who see networking as an opportunity to be in service of others or have more comfort or success in connecting others more so than connecting for ourselves. So thinking about a great way to network, or the right way, according to this author, to network is to connect the dots, connect other people, connect, an industry or different people or companies who might need to know each other. So which skills can you use to do tip number 5 and connect the dots? Definitely social responsibility. That's the first one I wrote down for tip number 5. And got a complete list here. There's so many, right? One that I wrote down that I haven't seen yet is flexibility, right? That might be a bit of a skill that we can exercise here. Still problem solving. Yep, absolutely. Okay, tip number 6, moving right along. There's only 8, 3 to go. Tip number 6 is figure out how you can be helpful, right? I would say the majority of people that I've been talking to in this session today that is where we naturally land, right? We value this relationship currency piece. So what skills can we use when our purpose is to go out and figure out how to be useful? Some of the ones we've already heard. Yep, I wrote down problem solving, social responsibility, assertiveness. I like that one. Thanks, Shelley. I hadn't written that one down. I also thought maybe empathy, right? Kind of putting yourself in someone else's shoes and figuring out how we can be helpful from their vantage point could also be good. Okay, tip number 7, follow up and follow through, right? So important. Many of us have probably experienced like someone offers to make an introduction for you and then they don't follow through on that, and that can be challenging. And it's also important for us to remember when we've made a suggestion or we've offered to connect the dots for people that we follow through on that. So which skills from our EI model can we use to follow up and follow through? Assertiveness, agree.
I have social responsibility on my list for that, because
Yeah.
I'm really, there's something about the greater good and just being conscious about the impact that I have on other people and how important it is to follow up and follow through.
Yeah, I even added emotional expression, which we haven't talked about much here in
Right.
these tips. Self-awareness, right?
Sure.
There's lots of things that we can still apply. Okay, last tip, tip number 8, probably my favorite because I love networking. Believe in the power of networking, right? Have that mindset of the opportunity to blossom and grow and exchange this relationship currency. Have that belief as we go about networking. So one of the right ways to network is to believe that it is powerful. What are some of those skills that we can use to really exercise this tip, the belief? Yep, absolutely.
For sure.
Rachel, exactly the 2 that I wrote down, optimism and self-awareness.
Yeah.
So as those of you talked about who are in Lisa's small group, right, we can use all these skills for networking. They're all important. I've got a summary slide with all 8 tips in one place, so you can come back and look at that, evaluate for yourself, like maybe where do I want to focus as I think about my relationship audit, as I think about the who I want to have in my network. Maybe taking a look at these 8 tips helps us create a bit of an action plan or next steps. In the interest of time, I'm just going to briefly mention there are lots of rewards personally and professionally to network. So if you need a reminder, or the people that you're working with maybe need a reminder, there are lots of great things that can come from networking. The why we might want to network, friendships come from networking. I'm looking in this small group today and I see friends, right? True friends who are in my life on a regular basis. And that is so wonderful. There's inspiration that can come from networking and meeting new people and hearing about new things and new ways of doing things. Certainly clarity is a benefit of networking because sometimes we learn more about what we do want and what we care about, and more about also what we don't want or what we need to avoid. And those are also great lessons to learn. Of course, we can get support from others, which is so important in our lives. And I'll go out on a limb and say, yes, indeed, we can find love of many kinds, love and support and caring when we are networking. So lots of great benefits. And as a final thought for me, I was going to mention just a few of my favorite resources, whether they be for you or other people that you're working with. These are 3 books. There are lots of things that can go alongside with these books, but these are the 3 books that I would probably recommend. I literally, they're on my shelf and I keep them nearby because I use them often with my clients. Many of you might be familiar already with Give and Take by Adam Grant. If reading a book isn't your speed, he's got a TED Talk on the same topic, which is a great place to start. So Give and Take by Adam Grant, I really think it's a great place to start. I mentioned briefly earlier this book, Friend of a Friend. This is by David Burkus. Really interesting. That's where I got a lot of the research about weak ties, interesting studies. This is also where he talked about people needing to take a shower after they think about the act of networking. So lots of interesting stuff there about like how to go about making connections. And one of my other favorites, this one's really kind of for a specific audience. It's called Mastering. Oh, there's my fuzzy. Mastering Your Inner Critic. And 7 other high hurdles to advancement. This one is actually written for an audience of women, and there's a chapter specifically dedicated to what the research shows about how women need to network differently. If you remember that third myth that I talked about earlier, that networking is something we do when all the other work gets done, that is particularly a hurdle for women. So if you're coaching women or working with women and you want to use these EI skills, here's a great resource around remembering that networking isn't something to save for later. And with that, I'm ready to open up for Q&A, Lisa.
Well, thanks, Jill. I really appreciate your presentation today. So thanks so much for doing that. I think we all can hear the passion that you have in your voice for networking and certainly the power of networking. So we would like to open it up if anybody has questions for Jill specifically. Any questions, comments, feedback? I think we're all open to any of that. So if anybody has anything to say, or you can certainly jot something in the chat. What struck me, Jill, and what I thought about it a lot since you and I did our walkthrough last week, but I love this concept of relationship currency and how we spend that relationship currency. So how we build it up and how we spend it in appropriate ways. And I think a lot about the EI practitioner network that we built over the years. And it's a pretty powerful network. And I know that people in the classes have developed some long-term relationships. So I just love that idea of relationship currency. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else have any comments or questions? I think Shelley's ready to say something.
She looks like she's coming off of mute.
I may have looked like it, but I really don't have a question right now. I was going to look at my notes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and thank you so much for understanding some of the technical glitches that we've had to kind of navigate today. So I appreciate that. Again, Jill, thank you for sharing your perspective and doing the research that you did. We really appreciate that. Our next session is in July, so July 21st, and Ann Papenchek, who was on the call, but I think she's had to get off it to go to another meeting. Ann is going to be here talking to us and making the connection between emotional intelligence and spirituality, which I'm really excited to learn more about. So just as a quick reminder, if you are making the EI connection in your practice and certainly willing to share with our community, we really want to hear from you. So please reach out to me. I'd really appreciate that. And again, thank you all for participating today. And I will be sending up sending you a follow-up email that has the recorded session, so you can certainly listen to this again and pass it on to others that you think might benefit from it. And thank you so much for participating. We'll see you at the next Crescendo Connect. Thanks so much and take good care.